There's a certain kind of man women often remember. Not necessarily the loudest man in the room, not the man who sends 10 messages when she doesn't answer, not the man who tries desperately to prove how interested he is. It's often the man who seems genuinely interested but still has his own life. He likes her, he makes that clear, but he doesn't chase her for approval. If she steps toward him, he meets her there. If she steps back, he doesn't run after her. And that difference can completely change the way a woman experiences him. Because there's a difference between pursuing a woman and chasing a woman. Pursuing means showing interest. Chasing means trying to get someone to give you something they're not freely giving. And women can usually feel that difference. If you enjoy conversations about attraction, psychology, relationships, and life after 50, consider joining our membership. Please subscribe to the channel. Here we explore these subjects in greater depth. Now, this doesn't mean women want men who are cold, distant, or indifferent. That's not the point. A man who deliberately ignores a woman, plays games, or pretends not to care isn't necessarily attractive. In fact, that can become exhausting very quickly. What many women find attractive is something much simpler. A man who is interested without becoming dependent on her response. He can say, "I'd like to see you." He can make the invitation. He can show affection. He can let her know that he enjoys her company. But after that, he doesn't need to keep pushing. He allows her to respond. And that creates something very important: choice. She knows he wants her, but she also knows she is free to choose whether she wants him. That can make an interaction feel much more natural. And the first reason this matters is that a man who doesn't chase communicates self-respect. Think about what happens when a man becomes overly focused on one woman. He starts checking his phone constantly. He wonders why she hasn't replied. He sends another message, then another. He starts analyzing every word she used. He changes his behavior because he's afraid of losing her. And before long, the entire relationship starts revolving around her reaction. That's when attraction can become mixed with anxiety. A man who has self-respect behaves differently. He can be interested in a woman without making her response the measure of his worth. If she likes him, great. If she doesn't, he'll be disappointed perhaps, but he'll move on. He doesn't need to convince her. And that's a powerful position to be in, because a woman doesn't have to wonder whether you're interested, but she also doesn't feel responsible for your happiness. The second reason is that a man who doesn't chase usually has his own life, and this becomes especially important as men get older. You have spent decades building a life. You may have a career, family, friends, interests, responsibilities, places you enjoy going, things you enjoy doing, and hopefully some things that have nothing to do with dating. When a woman enters that kind of life, she becomes someone you want to share your world with. She doesn't become your entire world overnight. That distinction matters. There's something very different about saying, "I'd like you to be part of my life," compared with, "I need you to become my life." The first feels like an invitation. The second can feel like pressure. And women often notice when a man has nothing else going on. If every conversation becomes about the relationship, if every weekend depends on whether she's available, if his mood changes completely depending on how much attention she gives him, she may begin to feel that she's carrying far more emotional responsibility than she expected. A man with his own life doesn't create that same pressure. He can enjoy her company and still enjoy his own. The third reason is that not chasing gives a woman the opportunity to invest. This is something many men overlook. Relationships aren't built by one person doing everything. If you're always initiating, always texting, always planning, always asking questions, and always trying to keep the connection alive, you may never discover how interested she actually is. You are doing all the work. But when you step back a little, something becomes visible. Does she reach out? Does she ask about you? Does she suggest seeing you? Does she remember things you've told her? Does she make an effort to keep the conversation going? Those behaviors tell you something, and you don't have to manipulate her into doing them. You simply have to give her room. That's not playing hard to get. It's allowing the relationship to reveal itself. And sometimes the most valuable thing a man can discover is that the woman he's pursuing isn't actually pursuing him. That's disappointing, but it's useful information, because knowing the truth is better than spending months trying to create something that isn't naturally there.
The fourth reason is that a man who doesn't chase can appear more emotionally grounded. Again, this doesn't mean being emotionless, quite the opposite. A grounded man can say, "I like you." He can admit that he misses someone. He can express affection. He can be vulnerable, but he doesn't fall apart because someone needs time to think. He doesn't become angry because she has plans of her own. He doesn't demand constant reassurance. He doesn't interpret every delayed message as rejection. He understands that two adults can like each other and still have separate lives, and that becomes particularly important in relationships later in life. People over 50 aren't teenagers discovering relationships for the first time. They've lived, they've been disappointed, they've had responsibilities, they've probably experienced loss. They know themselves better, and because of that, many women aren't looking for another person they have to manage. They're looking for someone they can relax around, someone who can communicate, someone who can show interest without creating unnecessary drama. And that kind of emotional steadiness can be very attractive. The fifth reason is perhaps the most important. A man who doesn't chase gives a woman the chance to wonder about him, not because he's playing games, but because he doesn't reveal everything immediately. He has his own routines, his own interests, his own opinions, his own world. You don't have to tell her everything about yourself during the first conversation. You don't have to explain your entire history. You don't need to constantly remind her that you're interested. Let the relationship develop naturally. When two people are getting to know each other, curiosity is part of the experience. She learns something about you, then she wants to know something else. You discover something about her. The connection develops gradually. But if you overwhelm someone with attention from the beginning, there may be no room for curiosity. Everything is already being pushed forward, and that's why patience can be so powerful. Not passive waiting, not pretending you don't care, just patience. You make your interest clear, then you allow the other person to respond. There's also an important lesson here for men who have been rejected. Sometimes a man thinks that if he just tries harder, a woman will eventually change her mind. He sends better messages. He becomes more available. He buys gifts. He keeps asking. He explains why they would be perfect together. But attraction doesn't work like a sales pitch. You can't negotiate someone into wanting a relationship with you, and you shouldn't have to. The right woman doesn't need to be convinced that you're worthy of her attention. She may need time to get to know you. She may have questions. She may be cautious. That's normal. But there's a difference between giving someone time and trying to overcome their lack of interest. Knowing that difference can save a man a tremendous amount of frustration. And here's something else worth remembering. Not chasing doesn't mean never making the first move. If you meet a woman you genuinely like, ask her out. Tell her you'd like to see her again. Send the message, make the plan, show some courage. Then pay attention to what comes back. If she responds positively, continue. If she seems uncertain, give her space. If she repeatedly shows no interest, accept it. That's not weakness, that's emotional maturity. You don't need to chase someone who is walking towards you, and you don't need to run after someone who is walking away. You simply need to know when to move forward and when to let go. So perhaps the real lesson isn't that women desire men who never chase them. It's that many women appreciate a man who doesn't abandon himself while pursuing someone else. A man who can want a woman without needing her approval. A man who can love without losing himself. A man who can pursue without pressuring. A man who can hear no without becoming bitter. And a man who can hear yes without immediately making that person responsible for his entire happiness. That kind of man doesn't need to play games. He doesn't need to disappear for 3 days. He doesn't need to pretend he's too busy to respond. He doesn't need artificial rules about who should text first. He simply has his own life, and when the right woman comes along, he makes room for her. That's a very different kind of confidence. So if you're over 50 and you're dating again, remember this. Don't become so focused on getting a woman's attention that you forget to pay attention to her behavior. Show interest, be warm, be clear, make the invitation, then watch what happens. Does she move towards you too? Does she make an effort? Does she seem happy to hear from you? Does she make time for you? because attraction shouldn't feel like one person pulling another person uphill. It should feel like two people gradually moving toward each other. And when that happens, you don't need to chase, you simply need to keep walking together. If you're over 50, I'd like to hear your experience. Do you think men chase too much when they start dating later in life, or do you think showing strong interest is still important? Tell me what you think in the comments, because sometimes the most attractive thing a man can do isn't getting a woman to chase him, it's becoming secure enough that he doesn't need to chase anyone.